Ehsan Ahmad is a stand-up comedian whose act can be regularly seen around the Austin area. He, along with Deric Poston, hosts the Solid Comedy Show, usually at the Comedy Mothership on Wednesdays. Tickets can be purchased at comedymothership.com. Next one of those shows at the Mothership is going to be on Wednesday, May 31st. This week, though, if you are listening in a timely manner, you can check he and Deric and their Solid Comedy Show out at Vulcan Gas Company. That would be on May 27th. Tickets at vulcanatx.com. Give him a follow on social media at Ehsan J. Ahmad. Ehsan, thank you so much for the time. How you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I need to tell you up front that I am one of those comedy nerds who really enjoys the fact that Austin has become a stand-up mecca in the last few years, not just because some of the obvious reasons, getting regular opportunities to check out Joe Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe, guys like that, but because it provides so many more opportunities to discover other awesome comedians. And I've seen you 2 or 3 times now, and I got to tell you, you are one of my favorite comedians in this city. You have what I consider to be the best joke in the city right now, without spoiling too much. The World Trade Center, the One World Tower joke.
Okay.
Just gonna leave it at that. People need to check that joke out themselves. So thank you so much for moving to Austin a couple years ago, I guess. So you moved here back in 2021. Why did you decide to come to Austin?
Well, so I had become a full-time comedian right before the pandemic hit. So the pandemic hit, I lost everything. Decided I couldn't live in LA anymore if I wasn't gonna do anything there. At the time, LA was a fun city, but the second the pandemic hit, it became awful.
Yeah.
You know, when you couldn't go out and all that. So I moved back home with my parents in the Bay Area, and then we're just waiting for something to open. And then Austin was the first thing open. A couple of my friends from the Comedy Store were already out there. They're like, "Hey, you got to move out there." I spent a week out there visiting, and by the end of that week, I already had an apartment. I was like, "Oh, this is the place to be."
I don't know if you still live in the same place or not, but where did you decide to settle with that first apartment in town?
I live around the same area, but I lived on 35th Street, and now I live on 33rd. But I like that area a lot, right above campus. It's a nice little area.
Yeah, that is a good spot. So you said you had just become full-time in the comedian game in LA. Does that mean you had received your pass at the Comedy Store?
I actually was never passed at the Comedy Store. I actually never got. I never got. I was at the level right before being passed, friends and family. I just was getting enough work around the country as like a feature that and a host that I didn't need to work a day job anymore or work a job anymore.
Did you have a game plan when you moved out here? I mean, did you feel like you knew enough people that you could get something going? Because I feel like the first time I saw you may have been a Tony Hinchcliffe and Friends show at Vulcan, maybe at the end of 2021 or something. So you felt pretty confident that that you could come in and really find something regular pretty immediately then, huh?
Yeah, so I worked at the Comedy Store for years, and a lot of the people that moved here are from the Comedy Store. So like I felt confident that I'd be plugged in with enough people doing comedy at a high level that I could also come here and start getting plugged into the good shows and sort of figuring it out once I got here.
Did that happen?
Yeah, it pretty much happened how I thought it would happen. And now that the mothership is opened, it's like beyond my wildest dreams. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I envisioned when I got here.
So you host a regular show with Deric Poston, who I actually saw open for the Joe Rogan and Friends show last week. The two of you guys individually are hilarious, and I imagine that when you come together, you have a lot more fun too. Is Deric somebody that you knew from your time in LA, and how easy was it to start something up with him here in Austin?
I actually met Deric. I started comedy in San Diego in 2013, and Deric was one of the first people I met. So
Hmm.
I've known Deric for, I mean, he's slept on my couch. We've been roommates for years. Like I've known Deric for so long, and we had a podcast together called Spoil the Beans that he still runs. And so our chemistry together is just so good. I'm gonna be the best man at his wedding, so it's like the two of us together, it just made sense to have a show.
Oh boy, he has a good bit on being engaged right now that I
Mhm.
recommend to people for sure. So, for people who may want to check out the Solid Comedy Show, it's going to be at Vulcan this week on May 27th, and then at the Comedy Mothership, which is where it normally is, next week on May 31st, I believe. What can
Yes.
people expect out of the Solid Comedy Show?
Just the the best comics in the world. We get so if you come to the Comedy Mothership regularly, you'll see a few comics that you might not normally see on any other show on our show because of the connections that Deric and I have. Some like incredible up and comers as well as like legends on our show as well. So it's just a great show. And then you'll get to see me and Deric as well, who, we pride ourselves in being, the guys who are quote unquote maybe possibly and hopefully the next up in the comedy game. So yeah, it's just a great show, and it's usually every Wednesday at the Mothership. Every once in a while, a big headliner will come and book the room. Like this week, it's not there because Dice Clay is here. Obviously, you gotta let a legend take the room if he wants the room, but usually it's every Wednesday at the Mothership.
Yeah, how crazy is it to see Dice become a sort of elder statesman within the genre? A guy who was a complete outcast, at least publicly, back in the late 80s and early 1990s. Of course, he's selling out arenas right before that, but then the public, I guess, decides to turn on him. But all these years later, here he is as one of the elder statesmen of the genre.
Yeah, I mean, and well respected, a legend, and it's exciting like people like that are coming into the Mothership. We have the legends, we have the current greats. Like we had a week with Gillis. Obviously, Joe is there. We had Chappelle there. Chappelle was the first one to open the small room, and then as well as like a bunch of up and comers that are probably going to be famous in a few years. It's a really great place to be a comic right now.
Were you hanging out with Chappelle when he helped open up the Little Boy a few months ago?
I mean, I was in the room. I don't know if hanging out with Chappelle is the right word, but yeah, I was definitely around. I've been around for many Chappelle moments at the store and here now. So I've lived a very fortunate life.
I would imagine that remains pretty surreal, regardless of how many times you've hung out around the dude.
Kind of, and also not really.
Okay.
The way I would describe it is so in college, I had this great dorm room that overlooked the cliffs of San Diego, and we got to see the sunset every night. And you would think this would be, oh, this gorgeous sunset, you'd never get used to it, but you get used to it. Things are special if they happen every once in a while. Once they start happening all the time, they become regular.
What was that, San Diego State or University of San Diego?
UC San Diego.
Okay. Did you graduate?
Yeah, yeah. I have my degree in cognitive neuroscience.
Cognitive neuroscience. Interesting. Is there a specific area within cognitive neuroscience that you especially enjoy?
Um, when I was in college, I studied a lot of like brain disorders,
Mhm.
which I thought was genuinely very interesting. But as far as like what I use from that now in my comedy, there was a whole section on like how attention works and how to corral people's attention that I still sort of use today on stage.
Can you give more specifics?
Sort of like if if the crowd is if I want the crowd to focus on me and be quiet, what I'll do is I'll move to a point on stage and I won't say much. I'll stay quiet until they focus on me. And then whenever I need them to focus on me again, I'll move back to that point on stage. So it's already anchored in their memory as like this is the point where we're quiet and we pay attention. Stuff like that.
Okay, so that's interesting you say that because I just read this book by Dan Lyons. It's called STFU, and it's essentially the art and science of not being a jabbermouth. And we all know people who are, to put it bluntly, conversational rapists. And one of the points that he makes is that everybody only has an attention span so long when you're listening to somebody else talk, especially if it's just a stream of words, which eventually doesn't even mean anything to the person who's saying those words. To put those long pauses in and to cause people, maybe they're thinking about something else. Obviously, you don't have phones at the mothership, or I'm assuming Vulcan still because of the Yonder pouches. Brilliant invention, by the way. So to force them to realize that there's complete silence when they should be hearing something, that's a smart strategy.
Yeah, it's a advice that a lot of young comics get, and I got when I was young is you got to be comfortable in the silence, because when you're on stage, especially the tendency is to want to fill that dead space with sound, and sometimes silence is way more powerful in terms of getting people to listen, in terms of getting people to pay attention, in sharing your ideas and making sure they come across effectively. It's like the areas where you're not talking can be just as important as the areas where you are talking.
Hmm. Considering that you've lived here for going on 2+ years now, what do you love about Austin?
I like the pace of life. In LA, it felt like if I wasn't hustling, if I wasn't out doing something every day, I was falling behind.
Hmm.
And in Austin, I feel like I can breathe. It's way less suffocating. And it's just got like regular people in terms of like LA, everyone is like there for a dream and they're playing an angle and they're trying to move up. And like in Austin, it's just like there's just human beings with jobs who are just content with living where they are and like the city, and it not everything's an angle to them. They're just trying to go out and have some entertainment when they come to the show, you know? So that's nice. It's like the people are less intense, the vibe is less intense, and it's just nice and laid back.
Are you telling me it grows tiring listening to somebody pitch you their project as soon as you meet them?
Yeah, I mean it's not even that like upfront, but you could just tell sometimes when someone's talking to you, and especially in LA, it's like, where is this coming from? They're not really, there's an angle here, there's something going on. Whereas that's not the case in Austin. Not everyone's trying to make it like that in like a entertainment way.
What's something that annoys you about Austin? Because there are plenty of somethings if you live here long enough.
So there's no the late night eating options are terrible for a place that you know, almost always brags about how good its food is. It's late night eating options are pretty limited. And the fact that I can't go to a store and buy marijuana is also, for a state that prides itself on its freedom, is pretty lame.
So I have not actually done this myself. I still go private market, I guess, is the most judicious way to say this. But there are apparently CBD stores that actually sell the real stuff around here now, which I guess is easier to do because it is completely decriminalized by the city. So maybe just
Yeah,
keep your eyes out.
there is stuff like that. Like I've definitely run into stuff like that, but it is like, so I'm in California right now visiting my parents, and it is nice like being able to just walk into a store. Like there's no shadiness, there's no back room, there's no like, is this legal? Is this not? It's just a regular store.
Yeah, that's a good point there. So you grew up in the Bay Area. Were you on the Oakland or San Francisco side of things?
The San Francisco side of things.
Okay, and you are a fan of big fan of three of the four major professional sports teams. I guess five if you count the MLS, but I don't count soccer as a real sport. But you're a fan of the Warriors, the 49ers, and the Giants. Which of
Yep.
those three teams, or I guess which of those two teams, because the Warriors and Giants have won a lot more than the 49ers have this century, have provided you the most joy in your sports life?
Oh, I mean, like the most joy. It's like they've all provided me a lot of joy. I would say, outside of being a Boston sports fan, this past century, I mean, this century, being a Bay Area sports fan is probably number two, in terms of we have what, three World Series, four NBA titles, and we've gone to two Super Bowls, which we've lost both, but it's better than never going. And then now the Niners with Shanahan, we put out a competitive team every year where it's like, where if Purdy doesn't get injured last year in the NFC Championship game, who knows what that team is? Purdy was running on some sort of black magic at the end of last year, and you see it now with Jimmy Butler and the Heat. When you run on black magic, you can win some stuff. So I mean, I would say the Warriors, because the Warriors, we got this because we were so bad for so long, and like a generation, like genuinely a bottom basement dwelling team in the NBA, and to see that go from that to one of the greatest dynasties, and now it's like, you know, uh, especially as long as we have Steph, it'll be like a free agent destination, and people will talk about like, oh, like how far will they compete? You know what I mean? And it's all that. So and we got to see one of the greatest of all time from rookie to now. At least I got to during my time here. Where when I started watching the Niners, the first game I remember was the '98 NFC wildcard game where the catch two against the Packers. So you know what I mean? Like we're at the end of Young's career, the beginning of T.O.'s career, but I don't remember his rookie season, at the end of Rice's career as a Niner. So for me to see a Hall of Fame generational talent from beginning to what will eventually be his end is pretty special.
Yeah, and Steph is one of those select few guys. And a recent example is actually a guy here in the state of Texas, like Dirk Nowitzki, that you
Mhm.
hope he never wears another jersey. Almost everybody inevitably does. I mean, it's next to impossible to keep somebody at one place for their entire career because of free agency. but it will be all sorts of wrong if Steph Curry is wearing, I don't know, a Charlotte jersey at some point.
Yeah, that's ironically that's what I was thinking is that because he always wanted to play for Charlotte. I know that's part of his thing, and I
Yeah.
can imagine him doing like a last year in Charlotte or something like that. Maybe I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to see it, but I mean he's synonymous with Golden State. You know, that's the reason why we're Golden State is because of Steph Curry.
Considering how weird this season was for you guys, and it started with Draymond deciding to punch Jordan Poole straight in the face, and after the season comes to an end, everybody admits that that was kind of hanging over this season all year long. Do you feel like we're seeing the beginning of the end of this dynasty?
Y yeah, a little bit. I mean, as long as we have Steph, that there's always a chance. You know what I mean? Like, it, it, if we could figure it out next year, I mean, there's stuff we got to figure out with like how washed is Clay really? Because he didn't have a bad regular season, he didn't have a great one either, and then he had a terrible series against the Lakers where they were just leaving him open on shooting threes, which I've never seen before from Clay. Like he used to be someone you had to guard, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was just like, oh, just give him wide open shots, he's gonna miss them. Uh, Seeing what kind of pay cut Draymond will take, and if we can develop Kuminga and Moody, there's a chance that we can maybe be competitive post Steph era. But like, if we can't do a good job of developing those two specifically, I think that we might be seeing the end of the dynasty. But I think if we're in contention for the Western Conference Finals, I refuse to call it over until we like don't make the playoffs really.
Yeah, that's fair. You still want Jordan Poole to be a part of things going forward too, I assume.
I I am more like let's see what next year holds because this year he wasn't. This year he had some moments in the regular season, but he was unplayable in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of the punch really affected him like that. But we'll see it next year. If he's unplayable again, we have to do something. We might have to unload the contract. I'm more let's wait and see with Poole and see what's happening here.
So as far as the 49ers go, there's a big question mark right now with the quarterback position. You would assume, I guess, that it would be Brock Purdy going forward just from his successes in 2022. But I'm a guy who watched Brock Purdy in college as a fan of the Texas Longhorns. He played for Iowa State, so played him all 4 years and watched him in a bunch of other games. There was a lot of bad that went with the good that he was throwing out there as a member of the Cyclones. You didn't really see some of those inexplicable turnovers or some of the other things that would derail his team at times in his first year as a professional. I guess given the three options that exist on your roster right now, who do you think the best guy is to start at quarterback with the 49ers, assuming Purdy's elbow is totally healthy?
Yeah, so we'll start with the assumption that let's say Purdy gets back to 100%, right? Because with an injury like this, you don't know. So let's just say assume he gets back to 100%. Well, it's gotta be Purdy because like you said, I watched a lot of his Iowa State like highlights and stuff, and those inexplicable turnovers just did not exist. This was a guy making great decision after great decision, and he's like I mean, got away with a couple lucky throws that didn't get picked. I can remember one in the divisional game against the Cowboys in the red zone that should have been picked but wasn't. But nothing like inexplicably crazy like you would see in Iowa State where he would just throw the ball up and be like, why would you throw that? None of that happened.
Yeah.
And as far as like, as a fan of football, I watch Purdy and be like, oh, this guy can play quarterback.
Hmm.
The throws he can make downfield, and like I was reading a stat today that as far as intermediate passing, he has the highest completion percentage at 80% for
Hmm.
intermediate routes. He has the same deep ball percentage as Patrick Mahomes. Like he was doing things that I was like, oh, this guy's passing the eye test. And I haven't seen really a quarterback like that for the Niners in a while where I was like, oh, this guy is crazy good. I mean, Kaepernick, when Kaepernick was at his peak, was great, but there was always a sense of he was riding a little too quickly. You know what I mean? Like the wheels could fall off any moment. Like it was really fast and there wasn't a lot of control. With Purdy, the control is there. Now, so I think he would be the best. Now, I don't know where he starts with his injury. I've heard that Lance's workouts with Mahomes have really made his throwing motion better. What Lance's ceiling is crazy, but he hasn't played that much football. He really hasn't. So it's like, in my mind, you got to go with Purdy.
And if I'm remembering correctly, you guys signed Sam Darnold this offseason too, which, look, I know what Sam Darnold has been up to this point, but to the point that you were just making, Kyle Shanahan has shown the ability to get the very best out of the quarterbacks that he's working with. He was in Atlanta during Matt Ryan's best year. Matt Ryan, who I think is a little bit overrated by people, one of the greatest garbage time fantasy football quarterbacks ever. But as a real life quarterback, I don't necessarily want him helming my team. Brock Purdy last year, Trey Lance before that. I mean, even Jimmy G, considering that Sam Darnold was a top 2 or 3 pick a few years ago, I feel like all is not dead with him as the guy under center for you guys.
It maybe that. So what the Darnold thing seemed to me was just like, man, if we end up in a situation where every quarterback gets injured again, I've never seen a team with the first 3 starting quarterbacks with year-long injuries. That's actually pretty crazy. So, but I think if they're like, well, we don't want to go in with a Josh Johnson situation, because once Josh Johnson was in, I saw it in our team, like, oh, our spirit broke. Like they got through so much adversity. They got there with a third string quarterback, and once the third string quarterback was injured, there's nothing they could do. It was just over. The team was done. You could see it in their just energy. So I think what they're doing is like, well, if we end up in a Josh Johnson situation, at least it'll be Sam Darnold, who, has the ability to make some throws that, most quarterbacks can't, being a high prospect.
Yeah, I think he has pretty good pocket presence too. So again, it'll be something interesting to see if Kyle Shanahan does have to flex that development muscle with Sam Darnold. We'll see. I don't think all is lost necessarily, like was, I guess, the case when he was with the Jets and then Carolina after that, especially when McCaffrey would either go down with injury or get traded to the 49ers, which, by the way, I know that Kyle Shanahan has proven running backs to be pretty dispensable, but that's nice for you guys to have Christian McCaffrey back there, assuming that he's able to still stay relatively healthy throughout the regular season and the playoffs too.
Yeah, I think if we are able to keep him healthy, and if Brock returns to what he was, I think we'll have one of the more potent offenses in the NFL. The weapons we have, I think, are just so great with, McCaffrey, and then Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and then you have, Trent Williams on the offensive line. Use check, like I just what we have offensively, it's I think going to be hard to stop if people stay healthy.
All right, we're going to return to the comedy for the last little bit here, because even though it turned into a bit of a San Diego sunset, getting to see it night after night, you have been around the likes of Chappelle and Rogan and Hinchcliffe and so many other great stand-up comedians. I'm curious for you, though, as somebody who has not only opened, but probably followed a number of these guys throughout the course of your decade-long comedy career now, who's the toughest follow that you've ever had to get up there after?
Toughest follow. Like what I like about the Mothership is that I have to follow. I have to follow greats all the time. Like I have to follow Hinchcliffe all the time, which is nice. Which is nice because now that's made me stronger.
Yeah.
And at the
Dude,
when I first started,
he is murdering right now.
yes, he's absolutely murdering. And when we first started, I was so nervous to follow him, and now it's like, oh, I can do it. Like it's been a confidence booster, and it's made me get better at comedy. But the hardest follows I've had to follow for sure. He's a regular at the Mothership. I remember one time I had to follow Brian Simpson.
Yeah.
All the way in San Diego, in the San Diego days, because me, Brian, and Deric came up together.
Oh, wow.
Years ago, and that was a hard follow. And there was one amazing comic. He passed away, unfortunately. His name is Eric Myers, R.I.P. I had to follow him in the belly room of the Comedy Store, and that also was like, damn, that was a fucking hard follow. But those are the 2 follows that stick out in my head of just like, this is tough.
Cool. He is Ehsan Ahmad. You can check him out at the Solid Comedy Show, usually every Wednesday at the Comedy Mothership. It's actually going to be at Vulcan this week, but check him out next Wednesday, comedymothership.com to grab those tickets, vulcanatx.com to grab the tickets for the Solid Comedy Show with Deric Poston. That would be this week on May 27th. Ehsan, thank you so much for the time today, man. Really enjoyed it, and glad to have you in Austin.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. Thanks to you for hanging out. For more of the show and to connect on social media, visit booksonpod.com. We'll talk to you next time on Books on Pod.